What's going on, YouTube? Lil Unk back into the reaction. Today we got the never-ending beef in Brum. Burger Bar versus Johnson's, you know what I'm saying? Like the video, comment, subscribe. We're on the road to a billion subscribers. The last little gang beef reaction will be at the end of the video, you know what I'm saying? Stay tuned for that. Without further ado, follow me on the gram at Lil Unk Official. And let's get into it.
It's 1985 in Birmingham, and the police officers slapped a fine notice onto an illegally parked car outside the cafe. When officers tried to arrest the man, he fled inside the cafe, where other people in the cafe started to protect the man and throw objects at the policeman. The violence started getting madder throughout the night, eventually turning into looting and even firebombs, which even resulted in two brothers who owned the local post office being burnt to death. This took place in the Handsworth district of Birmingham, where unemployment was rife, and the large majority of the population was either Caribbean or Asian. This riot breeded a Caribbean gang in the district, which was eventually used to protect each other against the highly racist police and white supremacists. The gang were called Inch High, and they started to become quite notorious after two members were charged for the double murder of the two brothers who were burnt alive in their post office. So as I said before, Inch High was starting to become more notorious after two members were charged for the double murder. Members from Inch High started hanging outside a Caribbean restaurant in Birmingham called Johnson's Caribbean Takeaway. They started to call themselves the Johnson Crew, or Johnnies for short. This was in the 90s when the crack and heroin market started booming in Birmingham, and the Johnnies wanted a piece of it, so started running up the drugs market and controlling security at some nightclubs where their drugs would be served, using violent tactics to take over Jamaican yardies who once ran the drugs in the city. But in 1992, tensions between members of the Johnnies were starting to mount after a member called Super D was charged for murdering another member over a female. This caused half of the Johnson Crew to break off from the gang and form their own gang up the road. The locals started to call the break-off gang the Burger Boys, because they would rob stores and go back to the Burger Bar Cafe on Soho Road in Handsworth, Birmingham, which was not too far from the Johnson's Caribbean Takeaway, where the original Johnson's members were chill. There were also more tensions due to a number of other reasons, but the problem was the gangs didn't have a specific area where they were from. They just had takeaway spots they chilled at, and more time the opposing gangs would be living right next to each other in the same area, with the majority of them all growing up together and attending the same schools. Then eventually both sides started picking areas which made more sense for them to wreck, mainly just because that's where the majority of the members lived. So the Johnny's crew started claiming two areas called Los Hills and Aston, while Burger Bar members started claiming two areas called Handsworth and Winston Green, leaving some members who couldn't move house to switch gangs depending on the area sometimes. By 1994, the beef was in full swing, and members from both sides started tit-for-tat shootings. The same year in April, a group of Johnson members made their way to a party in Newtown and knocked on the door to the party. A man called Keith Copeland opened the door, and immediately Johnson members shot him in the head with a shotgun. A Johnson's member named Ringo was originally charged for the murder, but was eventually found innocent due to a lack of witnesses and evidence. So the war was starting to heat up in the area, but it was just gonna get more hotter. In between Handsworth and Aston, which are two opposing areas in this feud, there was another estate called Newtown, which for the most part stayed neutral throughout the war. But this all changed when kids from the Newtown estate and members from the Johnsons were playing football in a park in Newtown. Burger Boys saw this and shot into the crowd of boys playing football, which resulted in Newtown siding with the Johnsons. And Newtown weren't here to play with the Burger Bar crew. A Burger Bar member called Ruben was chasing a Newtown member down the street when two Newtown members aged 13 and 15 then clocked onto this. They ran at Ruben and stabbed him over 20 times. The 13-year-old boy served 7 years for the murder and was eventually released. But he hadn't even been out for a year yet when him and 5 other Johnson members ran into a nightclub and shot a bouncer after he attempted to stop them, which the 13-year-old was eventually sentenced to 30 years in prison for. The Johnsons also shot another member of the Burger Bar crew called Bubbler when members surrounded his car and shot him in the head point blank range, killing him. By 1998, the two gangs had single-handedly rose the gun crime rate in Birmingham by 500%, making Birmingham the gun crime capital of the UK. At one point, on a good day there will be 1 shooting, on a bad day there will be around 6, which is crazy for a country where guns are illegal. The Burger Boys retaliated for their member Bubbler being shot in the head. Burger members ran into a Johnson member's apartment called Menace and literally grabbed him and threw him out the window of his 10th floor apartment. A Burger Bar member was heard bragging about it and was arrested, but charges were dropped due to no evidence. But the Burger Boys really wanted to show the Johnsons they mean business and ended 1999 with one of the most gruesome murders in this beat. It was New Year's Eve, and a Johnson's member called Corey went into a party at Winston Green, which is the territory of his ops, which are the Burger Bar crew, but found no one. But next day there was another party in Handsworth, which is again part of the Burger Bar's territory. Corey entered the party armed with a bulletproof vest and a shotgun, like he's about to enter a war zone map. At the party, he bucked into some Burger Bar members who told him to come outside. The Burger Bar members waited for him outside the alley packed with guns, and Corey walked walked outside towards them and shot his shotgun for the first shot, shooting one member in the hip. Burger Bar members then massacred Corey in a rain of bullets, literally surrounding him, shooting him over 70 times altogether. Eventually, after he was shot so many times, a member even grabbed his own shotgun and began to start shooting Corey with it after he was dead. One of the men suspected of this murder was a Burger Bar member called Micah, who was actually shot himself a couple months after the murder of Corey. The police were working hard to try and get someone convicted for the massacre of Corey, because these murders and shootings were becoming more and more common, and no one was getting booked for them. Birmingham was starting to look like the Wild West. Police started begging witnesses to come through about the murder, and seeing that there was about 200 people at the party, police thought there would be enough witnesses for some people to try and go and testify against them. But the police underestimated the hold these two gangs had on the local population. Civilians were terrified of the two gangs, and snitching was one of the worst things you could get caught doing. Only one witness actually ended up testifying eventually, but all she said was that she saw one member with a gun earlier, but this wasn't enough to prosecute anyone. And again, there was another unsolved murder in the area. Then the 2000s hit, and younger factions of both gangs started to emerge from the estates, and the Burger Bar name was starting to fade away, and most of the youngers from the area started claiming a new name called RMD or BT1 Bangers. Same thing with the Johnson's crew. Youngers from the area started to roll around naming themselves Slash instead, which breeded a new generation of this war, RMD and BT1 Bangers versus Slash. But for the purpose of the video and to make it easier to understand the division, I'm gonna keep the name to Johnson's and Burger Bar crew when referring to the two separate sides, because if not it can get quite confusing. And it didn't take long for the younger generation to follow suit of their elders. It was March 6th, 2000 outside the club in Birmingham called Fozzie's, and for once it seemed like a peaceful night. It hit the club 6 AM closing time, and people started leaving the club. One of these people being a young father called Christopher Clark, who was known to chill with a few people associated with the Johnson crew. Around 10 younger members from the Burger Bar crew spotted Christopher and started bottling him, but then one member brought out a shank which stabbed him twice in the chest, which reached through his heart and killed him, and then the killers ran away from the scene. Christopher was known to hate the Johnsons, especially because they used to bother his girlfriend. 4 out of the 10 members were eventually caught, one of these including a Burger Bar member called 13, who was named after his prison cell number. A Johnson's crew member actually managed to shoot 13 in the leg for revenge, but he survived. 2 days after this shooting, 13 and 3 other members were arrested and charged for the murder, but all murder charges were eventually dropped and were lessened to a charge of violent disorder because the judges couldn't figure out who actually stabbed Christopher. See, this was about 12 years before joint enterprise was introduced, which is the law now where essentially you could be convicted for a crime your friend done if you have some type of involvement or role to play in it. For example, if you're beating somebody up and your friend ends up stabbing and killing them, you'll both be done for murder. So before this was introduced, it was hard for joint murders to be pinned on anyone. But the beef really started heating up after Burger Bar's boss, a man nicknamed Nozza, was shot while he parked up in his car on Johnson's crew territory. Nozza was then said to have planned a retaliation hit. A man linked to the Johnson's crew called Ashkai had just came out of prison and was back on the streets. He was posted up in his BMW on a nice sunny day when the Vauxhall car pulled up beside him. Inside the Vauxhall were 2 men with semi-automatic handgun, and more than 20 shots were fired at him, killing him in broad day on a residential street. Now the police wanted to catch the killers badly, but there was no evidence. The only evidence they had was a strand of Nozza's hair found inside the Vauxhall car. The police found that enough to be evidence to put Nozza down for the murder, but eventually, years later, Nozza got his appeal and was released under insufficient evidence. He wasn't out for long though, after being found guilty of running the national gun smuggling ring, and was given a life sentence for the second time in his life. Now let's fast forward to 5 months time. Remember 13, one of the members who was sentenced for his part of the murder of Christopher Clark. He had just been paroled from prison after serving 2.5 years and moved to a nearby town called West Bromwich, and was trying to turn his life around and leave the gang life behind him. But as we know, the gang life doesn't work like that. When you're in, you're locked in for life. So 13, thinking he's starting a new life in the new town, started to hand out leaflets for a new promotional company he was trying to run. One of these leaflets going to 2 girls who had boyfriends or affiliates of the Johnson's crew. Real quick, one of the girls called their boyfriends and gave the drop on 13, and 2 members pulled up to the drop in a stolen BMW and fired 9 shots into 13, leaving him dead on the scene, which left both of the girls who set him up and the boys who killed him with life sentences. Then New Year's hit, and the Johnsons were throwing a New Year's party. The party started at a nightclub where Johnson's members were said to be mocking 13's death, which was somehow relayed onto Burger Bar Bar members. The after party was in a cramped hair salon, which had over 150 people partying in there. Burger Bar got the drop quick and rid there in a red Mondeo with a Mac 10 and a couple handguns. While a group of Johnson members were outside with a bunch of girls, Burger Bar set fire onto the crowd, leaving 47 rounds on the scene. 6 people were shot, including 4 females and 2 males. One member even hopping out the car to get closer to shoot at certain individuals. 2 of these female shots included 2 cousins, Charlene Ellis and Letisa Charlene's. A man called Nathan was the brother of Charlene, and he rang up his half-brother immediately called Marcus after the shooting, because Marcus was a member of the Burger Bars. Once Nathan told Marcus about the shooting, Marcus simply asked if they were dead. Nathan then checked and confirmed while crying that they're both dead. Marcus put down the phone and went on the run, realizing he had just took part of the murder of his own half-sister. 5 members were found guilty for the double murder, with 1 member nicknamed Dredd eventually acquitted for the trial. But a couple days after Dredd was bailed, he was shot 9 times in his head, back and neck by Johnson members but survived. Dredd was actually on another 2 murder charges after this, but both also got dropped, before he was eventually convicted and sentenced for his 4th murder charge in 2015 in an internal situation. So at this point there were countless tit-for-tat shootings and murders, which I could talk about for hours. But let's fast forward to 2004, when the Johnson's crew started to hit the booth under their new name Slash. These were in the Channel U days, which was a channel back in the day that used to broadcast all the new UK rap and grime tunes. It was pretty much the Link Up TV and GRM Daily before YouTube came out, and Slash started to get some serious traction on the channel, even collabing with the American group Dipset, which is something impressive to do back then to get recognition and even jump on the track with an American. The group started to rise some controversy as well though, when the member was shot dead in the middle of a music video for a track called Hardball after an internal dispute. And after Burger Bar members started making diss tracks back to the Slash crew, it was starting to become clear from the outside that Slash wasn't any normal music group. While this was all happening, there was more issues brewing up in the town. A 14-year-old black girl was caught stealing in the Asian hair shop and was supposedly dragged to the back of the shop and sexually assaulted by several Asian men. This took place in Newtown, which was an area affiliated with the Johnsons. So they rioted, burnt down and smashed up Asian shops around the town, which caused massive brawls between black and Asian people, resulting in one black guy called Isaiah Young Sam being stabbed to death by several Asians. In one day of rioting, there was 1 murder, countless shootings and 35 people seriously wounded. The riots ended up lasting another 2 days, when Newtown gangs were starting to shoot at Asian gangs in an attempt to get revenge for Isaiah. In one occasion, armed police were searching for a gang that was spotted shooting at a group of Asians. The group ran off while helicopters were searching for them. While running, an 18-year-old called Aaron accidentally pushed over his friend called Dwayne while they were scattering away from police. The fall ended up with Dwayne accidentally discharging his handgun, shooting his friend Aaron in the head, killing him instantly. This ignited a whole different feud in the area between Johnson's gangs, which were predominantly Caribbean, against Asian gangs. But for a bit of time it was mainly just tensions between the both races and some rare little spouts of violence, until the 13th of October 2006, when 2 black gang members from Newtown stabbed 2 Asian gang members. This was the same day of a man called Blanks' 20th birthday, who was also a Johnson's affiliated gang member, and without Blanks having any prior knowledge of the previous attack one of his members done in an Asian that day, he was shot in the chest and killed on his birthday. This murder was followed up by countless shootings, with 2 Asian men even being shot in the face 3 days later. And later on in the month, a well-known Asian gang leader was shot to death inside his shop when 2 men walked into his shop and shot him twice in the head with a shotgun. Now let's fast forward to one of the biggest moments in UK history in recent years, summer of 2011, when a man called Mark Duggan was shot and killed by police in London. The whole country rioted, and if you was around these times, you would know the whole country was in anarchy, including Birmingham. In one occasion, a group of men lured police towards a pub after firebombing it, and then began shooting at the police once they arrived, which 6 men were sentenced for 12 to 30 year stretches for. And quite a lot of older members got sentences for their roles they played in the riots, which made it quite a weird time once the riots were done, and made the older gangs, which were Johnson and Burger Bar affiliated, more relevant. And around these times, the new generation was starting to grow up, didn't have much ties towards the old feuds that were going on, starting a new feud, with members from the Handsworth, Winston Green and Hockside calling themselves AR or Armed Response, and members from Newtown calling themselves GMG or Get Money Gang. By the mid-2010s, both gangs had brought gun violence back to Birmingham, with over 20 reported shootings between both of them within a fortnight. And not too long after the big spout of shootings, a song dropped on YouTube called M to the N from a member of the AR side called Lynch, referencing real moments like when a 16-year-old got shot in the back at a barbecue. When police found this video, they started investigating Lynch heavily, especially after a bullet was found under his car after a shooting was linked to him, and he looked even more suspicious after him and another member was arrested in September after their car was stopped and searched, and balaclavas, gloves and stab vests were found inside the car. After months of investigating, police managed to link Lynch Lynch to 6 shootings and found drugs, ammunition, and a gun stashed in his house, slapping him with a 27-year sentence. Lynch really put drill music on the radar in Birmingham though, because after Lynch was arrested, his rivals GMG started dropping drill tunes laced with disses towards the AR gang, which started to intensify the rivalry and increase the shootings in the area. So police launched, which was at the time the biggest gang injunction in the UK on both of the gangs. This injunction banned 18 members from GMG and AR from Birmingham, despite them living and growing up in the city. And if they were caught in Birmingham, they'd be facing an instant 2-year sentence. This injunction also banned members from making drill music, which they believed to be one of the sources intensifying the beat. And if you look on YouTube, you'll find most songs from both sides are re-uploads, because the originals got removed from YouTube as part of the injunction. But this gang injunction wasn't stopping anything on the streets, so the police started getting more hands-on, sending out undercover officers to survey areas of high gang activity. In one occasion, undies were patrolling the block of the AR gang when 2 members from the AR gang fired 2 shots into the undies car, thinking it was the rival gang GMG lurking on their block, which makes sense why they thought that, because the beef in the area was as tense as ever. Not too long after this situation, GMG members were out looking for AR members in Winston Green. They were in a Ford Cougar packed with members and started shooting at a group outside the takeaway they thought were AR members. They didn't end up hitting anyone, so they were out looking for more members when they found an AR member called K Rizzy's Mercedes parked outside his dad's house. So the GMG members let out fire onto his car, hitting K Rizzy's innocent passenger who was sitting inside the car. See, K Rizzy wasn't even in the car at the time. He was inside his dad's house while his friend was sitting outside his. So when he came back and heard the news of his friend getting shot, he lost his head. The next day, K Rizzy and another AR member called Dazar were looking for revenge on GMG's block with a Mac 11. They found father of 4 Skelly outside a set of shops and let fire into him, killing him instantly, and both were eventually sentenced to life for this murder. Then the new wave of drill came to Birmingham, which was mainly led by a gang in Newtown called Nine Boys, who are linked with GMG. One artist which you might have heard of is called Trills. He blew up after getting 3.5 million views on his hit song Birmingham City, and his name was even more hot when in March of this year he was stabbed in the head by AR members. Well, this was actually a revenge attack after 6 schoolboys from Newtown and Aston rid out to Handsworth in a 7-seater car, shooting and stabbing a 15-year-old AR member called K1 while he was talking to his girlfriend outside his house. Currently, 4 youths between 14 to 17 have denied murder, and they will go to trial in October. Now, there's been quite a few more situations of deaths which have happened recently, but I'm not going to cover them in this video. But this war has been going on for longer than 25 years and isn't going anywhere, and I'm pretty sure some of the gang members who rep both sides now don't even know about half the people which have died for the same gang they rep. So guys, just think about that next time you find yourself in these situations. It's been your boy Kid Nerd, and peace out.
That's the end of this one, y'all. If y'all enjoyed this reaction, you know what I'm saying, make sure y'all click that last reaction on your screen right now, you know what I'm saying. You on the road to being subscribed, like the video, comment, subscribe, follow me on Grab at Law Official. Link in the description. Tell me which one we react to next, man. And we out there.